Last time we left off, we had just finished chapter 26. And in chapter 26, we had one more time, it was the second time actually, where there's a sort of meeting between Saul and David, even as Saul is just gathered an army trying to murder David. David, proves to him that he could have killed him, sneaks up on them in the night and then stands up on the rise and says, you see, I took your sword and but I didn't kill you. And again, we see Saul responding with seeming warmth. My son David, but because it's the second time, and Saul has been really crazy. Okay, again, he said he blesses him at the end. This is verse 25. May you be blessed, my son David. You shall achieve and you shall prevail. And he seems to regret what he's done. And then we have the very end of the chapter. David then went his way and Saul returned home. So they part ways. Now we start with chapter 27, where it becomes clear that David realizes that he cannot trust Saul. That as much as Saul will express these kind of positive emotions towards David, it's not something he can trust. The next day, he can just wake up one day and whatever. So he decides that he has to flee. David said to himself, same day, I shall certainly perish at the hands of Saul. The best thing for me is to flee to the land of the Philistines. Saul will then give up hunting me throughout the territory of Israel, and I will escape him. And this is quite interesting. He goes to the Philistines. Now, he actually had done something like this not long earlier, okay? So if you look at chapter 21, at the end of chapter 21, we studied this already. At the end of chapter 21, we have again that David is on the run, and on verse 11, chapter 21, verse 11, that day, David continued on his flight from Saul, and he came to King Achish of Gath, exactly the same place where he is now. The courtiers of Achish said to him, why, that's David, king of the land. That's the one of whom they sing as they dance. Saul has slain his thousands. David is tens of thousands. These words worried David, and he became very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So what happens? First of all, what's going on here? Remember that the Philistines are an enemy of Israel, and Saul is the king of Israel. So if somebody comes into the Philistines, now he's not the king of Achish, the king of Gath. He's one of the Philistines. There are 5 Philistine principalities. Gath is one of them, and each one has its own ruler, okay? And they rule their own fiefdoms, but very often when it comes to war, they join together as one Philistine band. But anyway, this guy Achish, someone comes into his kingdom, he doesn't know really what's going on, and that Saul is chasing David, and David really doesn't like Saul. He's an Israelite. He comes into the area, and so he comes in kind of as anonymous, in the same way that Achish doesn't know what's going on within Israel. David assumes that he also, doesn't know who David is at all. And then all of a sudden, there's people there who's saying, oh, we heard about this David. Saul slain his thousands, David is tens of thousands, which is what we learned earlier on, what the women of Israel saying whenever David would come back from some kind of a battle, okay? So what does Achish learn from this? Oh, David is Saul's partner in battle. He's his general, he's his, right man. And so that, of course, makes David very worried that Achish will see him not as running away from Saul, but as really an ally of Saul, and therefore he's at danger. So what does he do? He pretends to be mad, okay? And then Achish says to his courtiers, you see, the man is raving. Why bring him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to rave for me? Should this fellow enter my house? So he makes himself into a crazy person. And one thing that I learned recently, was that I actually knew it before, but I didn't remember it. And I've been going over some of the notes of when I studied these chapters with a favorite rabbi of mine, Rabbi Elchanan Samet, and he pointed out that in ancient times, a madman had a certain holiness ascribed to it. So if it, even though he may not have taken him seriously, it also gave him a certain degree of immunity. Oh, he's a madman, but don't touch him, don't hurt him. So that's what he did last time, and that saved him. But if we saw in the beginning of chapter 22, he immediately ran away because he realized he wasn't going to be able to play the madman forever. So he's already been with Achish, and he was felt in danger there. He played the madman. He ran away. Then shortly after that, he's in that cave, and then he goes to Moab. And we also discussed this and how Moab is actually a relative of his, because his great-grandmother is Ruth, and Ruth was a Moabite, okay? David's great-grandmother. And so he says he wants to stay with him, but what happens? Then God sends the prophet Gad to tell him he needs to go back to the land of Judah. So then the question is, why is it such a problem for him? So here he went to Philistine land, and now, first of all, let's be very clear about the difference between Philistine land and Moab. Moab and Ammon, if you recall, are on the eastern side of the Jordan River. There are 2.5 tribes that are living east of the Jordan River, north of Moab and Ammon. And God makes it very clear that the territory that belongs to Moab and Ammon is theirs, okay? That part of the land is not part of what is the inheritance of the people of Israel. That was given to Moab and Ammon as the descendants of Lot, and it is theirs. So the 2.5 tribes, which are then part of the land of Israel, so to speak, on the eastern side of the Jordan, that's north of there. So but on the other hand, you can say that even though Moab belongs to Moab, that territory, it's still part of this general area that we could say is it's kind of near Israel, but it's not part of the land of Israel. It's not part of the land that was promised to the people of Israel. The Philistines, however, are invaders into the part in the west, part of a land that really and truly belongs to Israel. It's a part of the land that only later on, David, when he becomes king, will finally defeat the Philistines and take proper control over these areas where the Philistines are hanging out now. So when he goes to Philistine land, he is not leaving the land of Israel. He is leaving the, let's say, political control of the Israelite kingdom, but he's still within the land of Israel. When he goes to Moab, he's already exited. He's not part of the land that was given to Israel. So you can see that this is a difference where God would say, no, you went too far. You got to leave Moab. You got to go back to the land of Israel. And we also saw at the end of 26, when David already kind of indicates that he's going to be leaving, and what's going on with him, and what he has suffered as a result of Saul. He said, for they have driven, I'm now in chapter 26, verse 19, in the middle. For they've driven me out today so that I cannot have a share in the Lord's possession. It's really the Lord's territory. But I'm told, go and worship other gods. And we discussed this a bit last week, this idea that if David is forced to leave the land of Israel, it's as if he's worshiping pagan gods, because he's leaving the land that God says, it's my land that I'm giving to the people of Israel. So here we can also apply that idea to why it was so problematic for David to stay in Moab, whereas it's less problematic to stay in the Philistine area. Now, the Philistine people are definitely idol worshipers, but it's in an area of the land that's still under God's more direct, spiritual cover, shall we say, Okay, so that just gives you a bit of understanding about that. Okay, so basically now, and we're seeing that he's going to go to Achish, and let's see, where were we? Okay, he's going to Achish, and he's going to try it again there. But we'll remember that last time it wasn't so good. What's the difference? David and his men stayed with Achish and Gat, each man with his family, David with his 2 wives, Achinoam the Jezreelite and Abigail, wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And when Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he did not pursue him anymore. Okay, so indeed this made a difference, because now David was under the authority of the Philistine king, and Saul could not risk making trouble with the Philistine king. He had enough trouble with the Philistines. So indeed, it did provide safety for David from Saul. Now, the next verse indicates to us that David still has a problem with Achish, that he has to prove to him whose side he's on. So first of all, we notice here that already now when David comes, he's coming with 600 men. He is coming with not only a lot of men, but men who have already fought battles for him and with him. And so he's in a much stronger situation than he was when he came the first time. But he then says to Achish, if you please, let a place be granted me in one of the country towns where I can live. Why should your servant remain with you in the royal city? At that time, Achish granted him Tsiklag. That is how Tsiklag came to belong to the kings of Judah, as is still the case. The length of time that David lived in Philistine territory was 1 year and 4 months. Okay, so first of all, what is this? At that time, Achish granted him Tsiklag, and that's how Tsiklag came in. So kind of reinforcing this idea of what I was mentioning before, the Philistine is really, that area is really part of the land of Israel. Let's go back to Joshua 15. Okay, Joshua 15, verse 31. 31. Yeah. So what we have in Joshua 15 is, part of the handing out, the dividing up of the land. And beginning in verse 20, we have, this is the territory of the tribe of Judah. Okay. And if you look at verse 31, it includes specifically the city of Tsiklag, Madmana, and Sansana. Very interesting, by the way. Sansana is the name of a modern Jewish community at the southwestern edge of Judea. It is like really on what was once the border between Jordan and Israel, pre-67 lines. And it's a wonderful community that we support today. We've been very helpful with them with security, especially. But anyway, I just love it that you see a modern community and it's taking this name. And so it is, they usually don't let you use a name in Israel unless it is very close to the original place. So that is really where it would be. So picture Hebron, southwest more west of Hebron than south, about due west of Hebron. So if you picture the Philistines being on the coastal area, just along that same, latitude, going for the east, you hit Judea. So the border between Judea and the Philistine area is quite fluid. If Sansana is still, if Tsiklag, Madmana, and Sansana are probably near each other, okay, Sansana is still Judea, and Tsiklag is somewhere west of there. So that just gives you a sense of where it is. But what happened to this place, to Tsiklag? If we go to Joshua 19, verse 5, okay, we have here a list of places that are from the territory of Judah that come to the territory of Simeon, because Simeon, his territory is actually within the territory of Judah. So we have here the names of the cities, and verse 5, we see Tsiklag. So basically, Tsiklag is a Judean city originally. It was given to Judah. It was in the territory of Simeon, which is within Judah, well within Judean territory, which tells us that Philistines are encroaching on Judean territory. They're not just at the very edge, of the sea where they first came in. when they first came in, Judah never managed to go all the way to the sea. Okay, but here we see the Philistines have encroached on cities that were actually given to and settled by Judah and Simeon originally in the book of Joshua. Okay, so we see here the Philistines are really an encroaching power, which makes sense. What we've learned about the Philistines ever since the time of Samson, essentially in the book of Judges. So we can historically figure out that somewhere around the time of Samson in the book of Judges, the Philistines are encroaching and moving east. And of course, we know that from the story of Samson. Okay, so that's what's going on there. I'm going back to our chapter. Second. Okay, here we go. So now he wants to go to this city, and it's very significant that he's living in a city. He is from the tribe of Judah. So in a sense, he's taking possession, he's repossessing a city that belongs to Judah to begin with. And I think that is really what this verse is saying. It's not just that, it says here, this is how Ziklag became to belong to the kings of Judah. So it remained a kingly city, okay? It wasn't, there are priestly cities, so I guess there were also kingly cities. So it remains that kind of city. But I think it's also very important to have this image of David already acting before he becomes king. He is taking certain kingly actions and is re-Judifying Ziklag, in a sense. Okay, now we're going to see exactly how it was that David managed to stay safe with Achish and not be suspected as a accomplice of Saul, when indeed the Philistines are fighting the Israelites on a regular basis. And we'll see already in chapter 28 how they really start going to a serious battle. So David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Amalekites, who were the inhabitants of the region of Olam, all the way to Shur in the land of Egypt. When David attacked a region, he would leave no man or woman alive. He would take flocks, herds, asses, camels, and clothing. When he returned and came to Achish, Achish would ask, "Where did you raid today?" And David would reply, "The Negev of Judah, or the Negev of the Rachmielites, or the Negev of the Kenites." David would leave no man or woman alive to be brought to God, for he thought they might tell about us David did this. Such was his practice as long as he stayed in the territory of the Philistines. So what's going on? Achish is testing him. Achish, he is no longer playing the madman, okay? But Achish is testing his loyalty. Now, at this time, there really isn't, we're very accustomed in our culture to have a national identity, to have a sense of patriotism, okay? So if you're an Israelite, it's very natural for you not to cooperate with the enemy of your people. That's normal, okay? But in these days, that wasn't so normal, okay? And if put the nation of Israel aside for a moment, normal nations in biblical times, okay? You had loyalty to a king, you had loyalty to a tribe, you had loyalty to an individual, maybe to a cousin, but you didn't necessarily have loyalty to some national identity that was considered much more amorphous, okay? So in Achish's mind, okay, David is coming and David is being pursued by the king of Israel. He has no loyalty to Israel. Why should he? Israel is against him. What is Israel? Israel's not the people of Israel or his fellow nation of citizens of Israel. Israel is the king. And if the king is against him, he's against the king. So that is the assumption. The problem is that David is from the tribe of Judah. And Judah, don't forget, is the nearest tribe of the Israelites to where they are there in the Philistines. They're right on the border there. And so Achish can well believe that he will turn his back on the nation of Israel. The question is, will he turn his back on his own brothers and sisters from the tribe of Judah? That's already a different story, okay? Now, it's interesting, though, if you think about it, we saw before, okay, when David was running away, there were these people from Sif. there was a desert area called Sif, a wilderness area called Sif. Twice, those people go to Saul, go out of their way to tattle on David and tell him where he is. So, in a sense, then, David might feel, would have felt loyal to his tribes people, but clearly his tribes people aren't treating him very well. His own tribes people are reporting him to Saul. So if you looked at it from a perfectly natural, normal way, the way anybody at that time would have looked at it, he would have said, no, I don't have any loyalty to Judah either. They turned on me. Why should I protect them? And this is how Achish is going to see it. Achish understands, or is being told, perhaps David told him about all he's gone through. So it lays the groundwork for Achish to believe that indeed David cares nothing for the Israelites, cares nothing for the Judahites, and he's perfectly happy to become a loyal Achishite, okay, and work with him. But meanwhile, there's always going to be that question. So even though it's reasonable, David has to prove it. How does he prove it? He goes and he attacks all these different peoples, not Philistines, because he's at the mercy of the Philistines, but he attacks all these people who indeed are enemies of both the Philistines and of the Israelites. Okay, he attacks them, he wipes them out. What is he really doing? He is acting as a king. He is completing the capture of the land of Israel. He's getting rid of some of these nations that are enemies of Israel and who are inhabiting land that really should be the territory of Israel. We know, for example, at the end of the book of Judges and starts at the end of the book of Joshua, but also throughout the book of Judges, there's a recurring theme that the Israelites didn't properly get rid of all these nations, and that has caused some of their problems. And so David is doing it now. Not yet a king, but it's actually a very kingly thing to do. But he's using it also to prove to Achish that he is loyal, because he's not telling them, I just wiped out Geshur, or I just wiped out Amalek. He's saying, I wiped out Judah. He's lying. He brings back the spoils, but he kills everybody so nobody can tell on him. Nobody will survive to go back to Achish and say, what are you talking about? He didn't kill Judah, he killed Geshur. He makes sure there's nobody alive to tell the tale. He takes the spoils back to Achish. He says, look what I got today. And Achish will say, where'd you get it from? And he'll say, I got it from Judah. I've been fighting against Judah. You see, Achish, I'm with you. I'm allied with you. And of course, that is what, and Achish, therefore, and we see at the end of the chapter, Achish trusted David. He thought he has aroused the wrath of his own people, Israel. And so he will be my vassal or my servant forever. Now, this, of course, is a very jarring statement. Because on the one hand, you could say David is very brilliant here, and he's worked out a way to protect himself. On the other hand, God certainly doesn't like David to be in a situation where he will be a vassal for some Philistine king, okay? So you could say, well, that's what Achish thinks, but David doesn't see himself that way. David doesn't see himself that way, but on the other hand, David has put himself in a position that at least for now, he really is at the mercy of Achish. And this really clearly defines that. So it's a bit of a pickle, okay? You could say David really has no choice. He's between a rock and a hard place. Should he have stayed and again risk Saul running after him because he suddenly changed his mind? He certainly was very clever in what he did. I think also what you see is you see David developing closer and closer into the way a king needs to behave, but he takes very seriously his role of a king as someone who's anointed of God. He refuses to kill his fellow Judeans. He refuses to kill the anointed king of Israel. He refuses to kill anybody of Israel. So he's also acting king-like in the fact that he's going to battle. On the other hand, he's acting like the king of Israel, and that he is maintaining very strict standards of what he will do and what he won't do, and putting himself in a position so that when he does become king, and he knows he will become king, he will be able to reunite the people, because he will have never attacked them, and he will have never attacked even their king. Okay, I want to start in chapter 28. Chapter 28 really introduces a whole new story. It is a story of Saul. We're going back to Saul now. We leave David for a minute. We're going back to Saul, and we're seeing Saul who raises the woman of the Ov. Let me see how it's written in English. Okay, woman of the Ov. They call her a woman who consults ghosts. Okay. In Hebrew, it's called Ov. Ov is a type of black magic, maybe, or something, and it's absolutely forbidden. It's considered pagan. And it is when somebody is like a medium and brings up the spirit of someone from the dead. Okay? So we're going to deal with that whole story and that whole part of it next week, because that raises all these other kinds of questions. What actually went on there? I don't want to deal with that today. I just want to provide the background because it's a clear connection to what we just did. At that time, the Philistines mustered their forces for war to take the field against Israel. So we have here the next step. Achish is not just an enemy of Israel. He is now, together with all the rest of the Philistines, going for all-out war against Israel. Achish said to David, you know, of course, that you and your men must march out with my forces. So now David is really in a pickle, because he's being expected not just to go on his own raids and pretend he had killed Judeans, but he's now supposed to join Achish in battle against his own nation. And what has David said? David answered Achish, you surely know what your servant will do. In that case, Achish replied to David, I will appoint you my bodyguard for life. Okay? What we don't know here is what did David actually do. Okay? We have the statement. We don't see him actually doing this, going out. Okay? We'll file that later. Next verse 3. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel made lament for him, and he was buried in his own town of Ramah. Now we know this already, okay? But if you look very carefully at the difference between the way this verse is written and the way it's written in chapter 25. Chapter 25, verse 1, it says Samuel died, and all Israel gathered and made lament for him, and they buried him in Ramah. Here it said, and Samuel had died. It's a different conjugation of the verb, putting this into past perfect. So it's very clear in chapter 28, it's not repeating the story of Samuel's death. It's reminding you of Samuel's death because it is going to be very relevant. First of all, reminding you he died, reminding you that he is dead and buried. Okay, so this woman is going to bring him up from the dead. We just make sure you remember he is good and dead and he's been buried. Okay, now one more piece of information we have here in verse 3 that we don't know from before. Saul had forbidden this worship of the Ov, the recourse to ghosts and familiar spirits in the land, okay? Which is very interesting. This is a very positive statement about Saul. One of the things he did when he became king was to wipe out pagan worship. He made it really a big no-no, punishable by death, king's order. You cannot do this. All right. So all these people had to go underground, stop doing it, and this becomes very, very significant as we go into the story. We see that when Saul goes to this woman and asks her, please raise up Samuel from the dead, she's petrified. And that fear of the king, she doesn't know that Saul's the king. That fear of the king tells us something about Saul, that we know from the beginning that he was a man who feared God. He was a good and righteous man. That's how he began. But what we also see is that he really did a wonderful thing to get rid of, we learned in the book of Judges how fraught with pagan worship the land was over and over again. And so what we have here is an indication that Saul really did a good thing in wiping out what was then something very, very prevalent. Of course, that creates a question, what's going on here. Okay, again, we'll put that aside. I just want to put 2 more verses. The Philistines mustered and they marched to Shunem and encamped, and Saul gathered all Israel and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the Philistine force, his heart trembled with fear. And I'm going to see if I can, we'll just finish this with sharing the screen. Can I do this? Well, I have it here, but I don't know how to share it. How do I do this? No. 1 second. How do I share this? This is what I need. 1 second, see if I can do this. I'm going to give it one try. I did it. Okay. You see it? You see the map?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a map of modern Israel. And that's why I wanted to show you, based on modern Israel, where all this is happening. You see here, this is the edge of the Sea of Galilee, okay? The southern edge of the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you go here, this is Mount Tabor. This is Kfar Tabor, which is right near Mount Tabor, okay, Mount Tabor. Remember, that is where Deborah and Barak, and they came from the east, and they encountered Sisera and the Canaanites that came in from the west. That's over here, okay? Now, it says that the Philistines gathered at Shunem. Shunem is considered to be in the area of Afula today. Afula is a modern town in the Galilee, and that's right here, okay? And it says that Saul gathered at Gilboa. Now, here is the Gilboa Reserve. Mount Gilboa is over here. So we have Saul and his people over here, and we have Philistines over here. Now, this is quite a distance from where the Philistines are. Picture the Philistines being east of Ashkelon, which is all the way down on the coast or near the coast. So they go all the way up the coast and cross over. Now, where are they crossing? If you see this road here, 65, you see this Route 65? This is a road that goes through the Jezreel Valley, okay? And, well, this whole area is the Jezreel Valley. This was always considered a major, an easy access for foreign armies that wanted to conquer the north of Israel. So you can picture the Philistines coming up along this road and camping over here, okay? It's the same road that Sisera came up when he was meeting Barak and Deborah, who are here. So we're talking about the same Jezreel Valley, which is over here, okay? And so that is where he's coming. Now, there's a theory that the reason he was coming so far north was because he wanted to connect up with Beit Shan. Beit Shan is right here, okay? So he's coming up to this area, ultimately wanting to connect with Beit Shan because Beit Shan is still at this time a Canaanite town. And there's a lot of Canaanite, we know this from Barak and Deborah, but this is an area that still has some Canaanite strongholds. So if the Philistines are coming up here, they're hoping to get some support from the local Canaanites and perhaps wanting to eventually hook up with Beit Shan. And who is going to block their access to Beit Shan right over here is going to be Saul and his army. But of course, they fail. That's what we will continue to study. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the geography here, and we will continue our study of chapter 28 and exactly what happens between Saul and this woman with her ghosts next week. And we will also, of course, after that, we will discuss what happens with the battle itself. But this is the background. Okay. How do I stop? How do I stop? Oh, wait, that's not what I want. Stop share. Okay, we're back. So any questions, comments?
Okay,
Wait.
I'll kick off. In chapter 27,
Yes.
verse 8, David is having a go at the Geshurites, the Gezerites, and the Amalekites. Well,
Right.
I think I know why you'd want to have a go at the Amalekites in particular, because they have a long history of jealousy and hatred of Israel. But why in particular the Gezerites and the Geshurites? Had they done anything heinous, or was it because they were just old inhabitants of the land that had to be
Yeah,
assaulted?
well, they're just part of the Canaanite nations that, they need to be defeated. And they're there. They're in that same area. So they're in the area that is actually ultimately part of the tribe of Judah. So it's getting rid of them. Yeah, and that's how they did war in those days, You had to get rid of all of them, otherwise they came back to bite you.
I haven't got a problem with God getting rid of them. I just wondered if there's anything particular attached to their history,
No.
the way with the Amalekites.
No, the Amalekites, of course, we know, and it's the Amalekites that Saul didn't finish up the job with. But these are, as far as I know, these are just subsets of the Canaanite nation. Yeah.
Absalom fled and stayed with the king of Jeshurun when Absalom revolted against David.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what did I missed the first part of what you said, Alison?
Absalom was put up by the king of Geshur when
well, I think it was a relative of his.
Father-in-law.
His mother or something.
Mother's father.
Mother or somebody there was from Geshur.
Was it thought anything in retrospect? Was it when he killed, everything? Was that in any way detrimental to his reputation in retrospect? Would there have been any other? No, there's no. In
other words, it seems. Look, there are some who would say this comment at the end of 27 that he'll be, like this servant to Achish, that might indicate some level of criticism of what he did. I'm not. I don't know that I see it that way. I don't see criticism here in the Bible of what he did. On the contrary, he comes in. He becomes king of Israel, goes right into a civil war where he has to defeat those who remain loyal to Saul. And then what that happens is he, gradually consolidates his kingdom, Hebron, and then he moves to Jerusalem. He has to capture Jerusalem, and he has to finally defeat the Philistines. All of that is part of him becoming king. And that is definitely something that is very positive, not just to solidify his reputation for Israel, but to solidify his reputation as a king who will continue the battle to settle and conquer the land. And I think that is something that he is seen as very positive. Now we have this one comment in Chronicles that we don't have in the book of Samuel, where David asked to build the temple. And in the book of Samuel, God just says, no, not you, your son. But in the book of Chronicles, it's more detailed. And it says, you fought too many battles. So again, some people see that as part a criticism of some kind of David's militaristic tendencies. I don't see it that way. I mean, I think he did what he was supposed to do.
So exerting authority.
Yes, as authority, and he ended up handing his son, Solomon, an empire. So I think when God says you can't build the temple, it wasn't like you did the wrong thing, but it's better for the person who received the empire without having to fight for it to build the temple. It's just kind of saying, you're the wrong person, not because there's something wrong with you, but you had a different job. And your job was to consolidate the empire. Now Solomon, who's inheriting the empire, he's the one to build the temple. And I don't see that as a criticism of David at all. So it's all the same line, though. This is the same kind of thing. But we see David beginning that whole thing right here.
Right.
Anyway, okay. Good to see you all.
Thank you.
I hope to see you again next week.
Good to see you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your good wishes and sympathies. And keep praying, please. We have a lot of soldiers out there that need prayer and hostages who need prayer. and people everywhere in Israel who need prayer. So that's a good thing. And we'll see you again, please God, next week.